Well, everyone, it's time for us to go ahead and compare the iPhone 14 Plus, the brand new big iPhone that Apple has just made, and compare it against the iPhone 13 mini and see which specific phone is the better one for you. Now, if you want to pick up either one of these phones, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there. You can help support the channel at the same time. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell you between both of these devices is that they could not be any more different. If you like a big iPhone, then the 14 Plus is one of the bigger ones you can get. If you like a smaller iPhone, then definitely makes a lot more sense to go and buy an iPhone 13 mini, but you will probably be shocked to see that the iPhone 13 mini and the iPhone 14 Plus are still being sold brand new by Apple. So the 14 Plus obviously, but the 13 mini, you can walk inside of the Apple store and you can go ahead and buy that one still, even though it's last year's iPhone. So that is really important. These two things are still being sold brand new by Apple. So if you are planning on getting this iPhone for yourself, you really have to ask yourself, do you like a bigger iPhone? Do you like a smaller iPhone? If you don't mind, then obviously I would probably recommend going for the 14 Plus. It is a bigger iPhone, it's going to have a lot more capability, and it's going to have more features overall than the 13 mini. So that is one thing to keep in mind. With the iPhone 13 mini, this 2021 phone, this device has a 5.4-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display on the front. Now it's a 60Hz panel, and it's a small phone, but it's still a really good screen for sure. And one thing to remember, the smaller the display, the less pixelated it looks, and overall a little better it looks sometimes. I like a bigger display, but there are some advantages for having a smaller display like this. You still have the notch, you still have a little bit of bezel around it, and you have a lot of colors you can choose from with this device too. But overall, I'm a fan of it. I was a fan of it, from 2021, and I'm still a fan of it now. With the iPhone 14 Plus, we have a much bigger 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. So this is a much bigger panel. It is noticeably bigger. It's not like, oh, you can kind of tell, not really. Like from the difference between like an iPhone 13 mini and maybe like an iPhone SE, that 14 Plus is a much bigger phone. And you're going to have to remember it's a thicker phone. And if you're carrying it day by day, if you have small pockets, if you're not comfortable carrying a big phone like this, then it might be a little bit of an issue if I'm being honest. Now with that bigger display, you are getting, it seems kind of like a less bezel around it and like a smaller notch, but that's not quite the case. It's pretty much the same size notch, actually kind of a bigger notch if you think about it. You have, the bezel and everything, so pretty much the same type of styling between both. They both have flat sides, which is really nice. So, no curves. Some people prefer curves. I am kind of indifferent at this point, but definitely the flat sides are more modern looking. And one very interesting thing to note, the iPhone 14 Plus does not have a SIM card tray inside of it. So you cannot go and just insert a SIM card tray if you want to. The iPhone 13 mini, on the other hand, does still have a SIM card tray. So you can go ahead and insert a new SIM card if you want to, and that might be something that's very, very important to you. Personally, I like having the SIM card tray. It's one of the reasons I haven't switched over to an iPhone, 14 Pro yet, just because I don't want to use the eSIM yet. But again, you're going to have to probably do it at some point, considering all phones are probably going that direction. So better, sooner than maybe later, but I guess we'll see what happens. Now on the back, we have glass backs on both. So this is another really cool thing between both. Luckily, they didn't go the FE lineup yet and go with the plastic back. So luckily still glass backs, which feel really nice. Dual camera setups on the back as well, which are very, very good, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now on the back, we have wireless charging between both, IP certification, we have MagSafe capability between both as well, but the iPhone 14 Plus does actually have that crash detection feature and emergency SOS satellite mode. So those are two cool things. I honestly don't think there are reasons you should go and upgrade to the 14 Plus, but they're a nice feature to have, and I would say, it's definitely cooler to have those things than not to have those things. So that kind of covers it up on the outside, to be honest. Now, in terms of the camera setup, they both are almost kind of the same thing. So with the 13 mini, you have a wide and an ultra-wide camera, which is great, and a wide-angle front camera. With the iPhone 14 Plus, it's the same exact thing. We have a wide and ultra-wide camera. Then we have the wide-angle front camera as well. Now, the thing is to keep in mind, I will start with the 13 mini. This was a pretty good camera for how small this phone is. For this type of device, for having that dual camera setup, I think it's a pretty good feature set. I think the only things that's kind of lacking compared to the pros is obviously the telephoto lens. But other than that, I will say for every single thing I will probably ever do on my phone, I think an iPhone 10 camera is still pretty good for me. Actually, I'll take that back. The iPhone 11 camera is still more than enough for me personally. So an iPhone 13 mini camera is just way over the top in my opinion. For everything that I do with Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram and any other social media platform I use, the 13 mini is more than capable enough for me. I don't really think I need a telephoto lens in those applications. And most of the time, if you really need to zoom in, you can always crop the photo afterwards. It doesn't give you the same effect, but it's still something you can do. And personally, that is one reason why I do still like, the iPhone 13 mini. The 13 series in general had a really good camera. Now with the 14 Plus, you are definitely getting an overall better camera setup for sure. I will say for the features themselves, there's two features that stand out. But for like the average person who doesn't really care about those things, like I love cinematic mode, right? And cinematic mode is available on both these devices. You do have cinematic mode at 4K on the iPhone 14 Plus, which is nice. And you do have that new action mode, which is really cool too on the 14 Plus as well. But personally, I probably will never use those features and I never shoot in 4K. So something like the iPhone 13 mini would still be more than enough for me. You are getting a new photonic engine you are getting this new autofocus front camera feature thing, which is cool, but the front camera already had autofocus, so I don't really even understand what that's about, but that's a new feature now. But I will tell you when it comes down to it, I think the iPhone 14 Plus camera is probably better, but the 13 mini is still way more capable for me personally. Maybe you need the features, but that's just kind of how I see it. Now, in terms of the software and longevity, this is another kind of important thing. Both of these phones have the exact same chipset inside. Now, what does that mean? Well, pretty much the iPhone 14 Plus and the iPhone 13 mini are pretty much probably going to be lasting the same exact amount of time. Now, could it be that the iPhone 14 Plus ends up lasting longer? That is completely the case, but I'm not really too sure. I think, in my opinion, if I had to guess, they're probably going to be lasting the exact same amount of time, but I guess time will tell at that point. But this does kind of lead us straight into the performance segment of both of these devices. Now, the iPhone 13 mini has that Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it with 4 gigabytes of RAM, where the iPhone 14 Plus has that Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it as well with 6 gigabytes of RAM. So you are getting 2 more gigabytes of RAM on the 14 Plus than on the 13 mini. So that might be something big to keep in mind if you're somebody who's playing super heavy intensive games or you're editing really large videos on your phone. Well, having more RAM is definitely going to help you in those cases. But if you're somebody like me who pretty much does all their work on a MacBook and you just use your iPhone just to talk to people and just go on Reddit and other things like that, Snapchat and stuff, then obviously I think a 13 mini is probably still going to be good for you. But I've been using the 13 mini for, the last year whenever it came out, and I've compared it to tons of different phones. And although it's a small phone and it does give you kind of the impression that it's like a slower phone just because it's smaller, it is still a very fast phone and it is more than capable enough. I mean, the 14 Plus still has a variation chipset of this thing. Like, it's not the A16 Bionic, it's still the A15 on the 14 Plus. So really the only thing you're getting is I think you're getting an extra core on the 14 Plus, and then you're getting the RAM, which the RAM I think is a bigger upgrade than the chipset between these two. So I feel like Apple should have highlighted the RAM a little bit more, because even after the keynote I didn't even really know. So personally, I think going from a 13 mini to the 14 Plus, the only performance increase I would say besides the core that's unlocked basically is the extra amount of RAM. If you need it, then go for it. But personally, even from my iPhone 13 to my iPhone 13 Pro, which the difference there is 2 gigabytes as well, I never really saw that big of a difference. So in terms of the RAM management, and performance, that kind of covers it up there. In terms of battery life though, this is probably going to be the bigger difference. The iPhone 13 mini, just based off Apple's website, says 17 hours of video playback. The iPhone 14 Plus has 26 hours of video playback. So you are getting way more battery life from the iPhone 14 Plus than the 13 mini. And I've been using the 14 Plus for a while, and that phone definitely has a really good battery life as well. So to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I'll tell you is, I think between both, definitely the iPhone 14 Plus is, I think, the better phone overall. I mean, you're definitely getting better battery life. It's going to be, you're going to be getting better RAM, better camera kind of, and it's a bigger phone and I like bigger phones. But the 13 mini, I will say, is still very, very good. Like, that phone is still very good. And if you like a smaller phone, then that's even more of a reason to pick up the 13 mini. So in terms of that kind of covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.